So building on last time, for those of you who weren't here and for those who were here, I talked about working productively with our personality patterns known as the hindrances and defilements in Buddhism. And these are the things that take us off of our meditation object, whatever meditation we're doing, we have an object that we're attending to, and we can get pulled off. And those really, what we're seeing there is the building blocks of our personality. And so how do we work with those, with that material? And the Enneagram is a great tool for doing that. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. But I'm going to start actually with talking about Buddhist psychology and how the Enneagram and Buddhist psychology fit together. So there's a very well-known Buddhist scholar named Bhikkhu Bodhi, who has an article called Taking Stock of Oneself. And if you haven't seen it, you might take a look at it. But really what he's saying there is that an honest self-assessment of ourselves, what our strengths are, what our development areas are, and in our practice, especially, where are we finding freedom from during the meditation, freedom from our habitual patterning, and what is going on with that patterning. And in Buddhism, we have what's called the hindrances and defilements. I talked about those last week. As the Buddha's offering around working with the personality patterning and how he was sort of organizing personality patterning. So I won't go back through all of them, but as a reminder, the three main defilements. So defilements are really those core patterns that are so core to our personality that they don't go easily. They can be thinned, of course, in meditation. That's a big part of the benefits of practicing, is that we do these thin out and we suffer less, and we find that we're less compulsively drawn into these patterns. And really, when I use the word compulsive, I'm not using it as a judgmental term. It's just describing if I'm trying to be with the breath at the belly or in this area, wherever, and I can't not go off, that's the definition of compulsive, So when that's happening, we're seeing our thought patterns that are running all the time under the surface unconsciously, unless we're meditating and we start noticing them. And this is why I say that they're compulsive, because we can't not do it. So this is a normal thing. This is part of the benefit of meditation, is that we get to see these things. Wouldn't you rather know what these are, rather than just having them run you on autopilot, not having a clue that that's happening? So this is really the zone that I'm working with, is what is happening there, and how do we work skillfully with them, rather than just saying, oh, they're empty, that's been done. And I'm not saying it's not true at a certain level, at an ultimate level, but at a psychological level, it's really helpful to be able to work with these and work with them skillfully. So in Buddhism, then, the three main defilements are delusion, which used to be called ignorance. Our modern words are a little bit less, blunt. So that's the first one. The second one is aversion. And this means pushing, so delusion is really where we're falling asleep on ourselves. We're falling asleep on ourselves. And I went through this in quite a lot of detail last week. Aversion is when what we find we're being pulled off by is wanting to get rid of something that if I could just get rid of that, then things would be better. So that includes things like anger, hatred, and also fear, worry, anxiousness. So there's a sense of something unpleasant that we'd like, that we're finding we're going there and wishing that it would go away or that it would be different. And then the third is desire. It used to be called greed, and that is wanting something. So we find that we're going off into patterns where we're wanting something, and that's, there's different wanting patterns of a lot of times planning, fantasizing can be a wanting pattern. Some of the patterns, it's hard to tell which one it is. You have to really feel into it. But the desire patterns include, wanting, but also things like jealousy, envy, comparing mind a lot of times has desire in it, if we really feel into what's going on there. So these relate to the Enneagram, which I'll get to in a bit. But, just to get back to the Bhikkhu Bodhi article, and the point he's making is that really, transcending the personality isn't enough. We really need to work directly with it to transmute it. So I talk about this as in terms of, when you're meditating, any meditation at any time, one of two things is happening. Either transformation, so this is where you're being pulled off of your meditation object into patterning that you're seeing. And I'm not sure if I said this time, but there have been a number of studies that show that we have 80 to 90,000 thoughts a day, most modern humans. And so that's a scary thing. But the second, the more scary thing is that 80 to 90% of those thoughts are repetitive. And they're not just repetitive today, but last week, last month, last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, our childhood. That's when a lot of these patterns get laid down, especially they're the building blocks of the me, of the ego self. So they're not doing a whole lot. They're creating these deep grooves in our consciousness. And, that's the synaptic pathways. They've shown that the synapses are much wider if we think about something a lot. If we start thinking about it less and less or going there, that groove gets smaller, just like a deer trail in the forest. If the deer are walking over it all the time, it's really visible. But if they stop going there, it fills in. So that's really what we're doing. One of the things we're doing in meditation, it's really like a software upgrade, except we're both the program and the programmer. So we're, by just not going, say somebody has a self-judging, self-criticism pattern, that doesn't feel good. It's a hard pattern to be beating ourselves up all the time. If we even get a little bit of relief from that, our lives are going to be so much better. So this is part of what we're doing in meditation is deconditioning those programs. So taking honest stock of ourselves is really an important part of this. And so the two things we're doing, to get back to that, is transforming the personality material. That's a software upgrade. Or we could be transcendence. So transformation or transcendence. Transcendence is when we're having a good sitting. It's peaceful. Maybe we're not having much thinking. Maybe it's a little bit joyful or blissful, or we're feeling one of the Brahma Viharas, our heart's open, or we just have equanimity. Those are all parts of our deeper nature that we're being in touch with when the me isn't obscuring it, when the personality isn't obscuring it. So we all want the transcendence. A lot of people think that they meditate once, and then they should have transcendence. Like, oh, I can't meditate. I keep getting lost in thought. I'm no good at it. I mean, that's like say somebody's a new runner, and the first time they try and run from here to the stoplight. I remember when I first started running, I had a partner at the time who was doing like half marathons and marathons. And so I thought, oh, I should start running. I was in my 20s. I mean, I was almost dying by the time I got to the light. I was in pretty good shape at the time. If I had done that once and then thought, well, I'm a terrible runner, you can't do it once and base it on that. This is why it's a practice. So with meditation, the fact that we're going off of our object, that's not unusual. When we're coming back to whatever the object is, we're challenging those patterns. So it's just like any other practice that we're doing. We get better with it the more we do it. Just like when I was learning to run, I was not very good at the beginning, but eventually, I was never great at it, but I could run 6 miles without being that tired, but that took a lot of effort. So meditation is kind of like that. So if you think of it that way, transformation and transcendence, if you're working with the transformational material skillfully, that is just as useful as the transcendence, even though the transcendence is a lot more fun. That's what we all want, but that's part of why that happens more, is because we've transformed within that personality material. So, so I'll go on now to talking about the Enneagram as a map of the personality. And I'll just show you this diagram of the Enneagram. You don't really need to know it or memorize it, but just so you can see it. It's a diagram that's got a circle, and then it's got these 9 points. And then there's arrows because the different numbers and the types, the Ennea types, it's called, have relationships to each other, some of them. So I just wanted you to see the diagram. Again, I'm not, really going to be referring to it a whole lot, but that's what the visual of it looks like. And so this is a map of the personality that is really useful for working with the personality material. Now, it doesn't come from Buddhism. So like when I first started using this, I've been using it myself. Like when I worked as in the business world with executives, I used it all the time because it would help me work with the person better. If I could really understand what their Enneatype was, not by talking to them about it, by just my own assessment, I could reach them a lot faster because I could understand some of the motivations and what was going on underneath. And then when I became a Buddhist teacher 20 years ago, I have a year-long mentoring program. And the first time I did the mentoring program, I included the Enneagram, and I was really kind of nervous about it because it's not from Buddhism. And I thought, what are people going to think? And at the end of the first 3 years that I did my year-long mentoring program, I gave out a questionnaire about what was most useful and so on. And every time the Enneagram was the most useful thing, even over the Buddhist practices, which was like shocking to me, But people had already known the Buddhist practices, so it wasn't really that it's more useful. It's just it was newer, but people really just that there was so much insight about themselves, and it's still true. And like I've been working with it for myself and others, but with myself for about, how old am I now? Probably over 30 years. And I keep finding new insights about myself, deeper layers, more subtle things, using the Enneagram as part of my path. So it's not from Buddhism, I'll just say that, but it is a great adjunct because in the middle of this diagram is a triangle. And this triangle includes all 3 of the defilements I just told you. So really the basis of the Enneagram is the defilements in Buddhism. So how cool is that? So it's just like a broader, it's a larger exposition of what the Buddha already was saying. So the origin of the Enneagram is kind of shrouded in mystery. It's believed that it comes from the Middle East, probably Afghanistan, from a group that is also shrouded in mystery called the Sarmoon Brotherhood. And it really came to us through Gurdjieff, if you remember Gurdjieff, and then other teachers who learned from Gurdjieff and his descendants, and some of the, like Hamid Ali, who founded the Diamond Approach, which I've been involved with for 18 years. And Sandra Maitre is also a teacher in the Diamond Approach, Claudio Naranjo. And then there have been a number of teachers that came from some of them. So there is an assessment online, and the place to find that is the Enneagram Institute, and I think it's like $15 or something. So I'll talk about that in a bit. But that is the best place to go, and the best book that I recommend to begin with is called The Wisdom of the Enneagram by Rizzo and Hudson. So just if you're looking for references, those are my favorites to start. There are other great books that are better for later. And one of the things about the Enneagram that is really important, in my opinion, so this was a tool that came out of the Sarmoon Brotherhood, the White Brotherhood, as a tool for the spiritual path. It was a tool that was designed for us to help to understand how our identification with the body and the ego self, the personality, has become our number one refuge over the grounded being. So what do I mean by that? And I'll just give you I do this all the time. So this is our normal view of reality, that like I'm here and you're here and your computer's here and, the garbage can's here, and they're all separate. And from this view, that's not false. It's true from this view. But if I take the paper away, which is the veil of the personality, there's a whole deeper reality that we're not in touch with. And this is what the Buddha was pointing at. This is the whole point of what he was pointing at, that like when we know what we are only here, we're going to suffer because we're identified 100% with things that are impermanent, that are going to rise and pass away. This body's going to die. This personality will not exist at some point, and everything that we know and love is going to have the same thing. But when we know what we are at a more fundamental, ultimate level beyond that, there is a peace, and there's also non-separation from the rest of the totality. Because down here, I can still feel my finger, but is it separate from this finger at the level of the hand? No, it's not. So our consciousness isn't limited by the physical body. That's why we can know these things. And so what's blocking that is our identification with the ego self, which again, in Buddhism, it's a, psychologically, there's a functionality to that for living as a human. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not the end point for the potential of humanity. Having a healthy ego structure is important for the spiritual path, but there is a potential that we have that goes beyond that. So the Enneagram was designed as a tool for realizing how these 9 unique ways, so there's 9 different Enneatypes, 9 ways of turning away from our deeper nature and becoming completely identified with this so that we don't even see this or know it anymore. We don't know the transcendent. When we're 100% identified with the me, that's the 80 to 90,000 thoughts a day. We think that's what we are. And sadly, most of humanity won't ever even have a chance to question that without meditating or some other spiritual practice or therapy. Therapy is a great way to see beyond as well. But therapy, for the most part, is really designed to have a strong, healthy ego structure and be a functional, happy human, which is wonderful. But the spiritual path includes that, but then also goes beyond to our full potential as a human. So that's, the Enneagram is really it's a personality tool that is designed to help us see how we're identifying with the ego self and trace our way back to our deeper nature so that identification can loosen. So I'll just talk about the inner triangle then, and how does this happen then? How does this, and here's the inner triangle, how does this sort of fall from grace, fall from our oneness or our non-separation from our deeper nature happen? I mean, are we like just born to suffer and die? Is that kind of the point of being human? No. So my answer to that is no. And having an ego self, every human that we know of so far, even the Buddha had one. So there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing, that's flawed in it. It's just a stage. So the first stage then at the top of the Enneagram is 0.9. And that is considered to be the ultimate turn away for all of the Enneatypes. Just like in Buddhism, what the equivalent would be ignorance or delusion. So this is a falling asleep on ourselves, and the ultimate falling asleep on ourselves is falling asleep to our deeper nature. That is the whole point of Buddhism, is that we could have a great life up here, but we're still not in touch with something that is deeper, that is indestructible. And when we know what we are at that level, there is a peace that goes beyond circumstances. We have a much greater capacity for equanimity in the face of difficult circumstances, and for a kind of open-handedness when things are going good, that we don't cling to the same level, and also not falling asleep ourselves. So that's the core delusion in both Buddhism and the Enneagram is delusion, is falling asleep on ourselves. And so when we're born into the physical realm, we all get one of these things, which is a wonderful thing to have, which is a body, which we need to be in space and time. Without this, we can't exist in space time. So it's kind of a miracle. And then an individual consciousness that isn't separate from this deeper ground, but is individual. Like the Buddha and Ananda were not having the same experience, just like you and me are not having the same experience. So there's something that's individual, but that does not have to be separate. But it does, it gets affixed to a body, so we know where we are in space and time. And as an infant, infants don't have a sense of being separate. We know this psychologically, that there's what's called the dual unity with the caregivers, where there's a sense of non-separation, just like what we believe animals have, where they are their deeper nature, but they don't know it. There's no self-reflection to know that. So they are it, they're being it, but they don't know it. And then as an infant, what happens, now there's this body thing that we're, attached to. And the caregivers are providing, like if there's hunger, if there's diaper changing needing to happen, whatever is needed, soothing, it's all coming from what appears to be the outside. And we start feeling like I end at the edge of my body, that I end at the edge of my body boundary, and that all the solutions, everything I need seems to be coming from outside. And so then this is where, as like a 2-year-olds, if you say, I'm going to the store, they don't know what that means. You have to say, mommy's going to the store, because they don't have a me yet. This applies to all of us when we were 2. So this is where the terrible twos come. Me do it, and they start having a little me and start feeling separate and getting really identified with the body. And then they start falling down and realizing, this thing is really fragile, and like, I'm at the mall and dad, I can't find dad. And now there's, and they start realizing this is a scary place in a lot of ways, and I'm this big and I can't really take care of myself. So this is when we go down to 0.6 on the Enneagram, where fear is the biggest factor, and anxiety, because there's a realization that as kids, that we realize that we're fragile and that we really are totally dependent on our caregivers for our survival. So then fear starts coming, and that's when and this is a journey that all of us have. We go to 0.3, which is the performer. So I better do it myself. I better take care of myself, because no one else is going to be able to do that forever. And I'm going to be the one doing it. Me. So this is where the me gets fully formed. And we, at some point around 8, 10 years old, a little older, the base layers of our personality patterning are in place, of the things that we needed to do to be okay in our environment and the things we came in with. So it's a combination of nature and nurture, just like in psychology. That's how it's understood in the Enneagram. So that's really the understanding of how we turn away from our deeper nature and become identified with the physical level, with the surface level. And we don't even know our deeper nature anymore. But the thing is that we need to have an ego self in order for self-reflection, because, and as far as we know, animals, and we know that infants, there may be some animals that have self-reflection, and maybe we'll be able to speak to them at some point and find out. But the self-reflective consciousness is what allows us to know our deeper nature instead of just being it. So that's the scaffolding of the ego self. And ultimately, we can sort of see through that scaffolding, and we can both know our deeper nature and be human. and the two don't have to conflict with each other. And that's really the full flowering of the potential of the human, is to know what we are at the ultimate level. I mean, this is a whole journey that the Buddha was pointing to, that he underwent, of being a normal person. I mean, he was from a, he was a prince, so he wasn't 100% normal, but, he said, I'm a human just like you, and you all can have the same journey. So he was pointing at the potential for really knowing what we are beyond the personality and the body and the physical realm, to something that is, when we know that's what we are, there's a peace that gets us through a lot. It makes the experience of life very different when we have more access to that, or even more ongoing access. So the Enneagram is really pointing to the different ways that happens. And so if you haven't done, if you've been interested in the Enneagram, I encourage you to do the Enneagram Institute test. It's at the Enneagram Institute. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but this is what I use for my mentoring program. And everyone I've worked with over the 20 years has been in the top 3. So they give you their free descriptions on there, and you can, sometimes people land in one right away. Other times people aren't so sure, and it's good to get some help from somebody, your loved ones or a professional, me or an Enneagram expert, on what your core Enneatype is. Because really the value of working with the Enneagram on the spiritual path is really understanding, what have I replaced the ground of being with in terms of how I feel I get my value, and what the ego is like a doing machine, what I have to do to be safe. So each Enneatype has a different way of doing that. So I'll just use the ones that I mentioned, the 9, 3, and 6. So the 9 is the peacemaker and mediator, and the 9 delusion is the core defilement there. So it's like, don't keep this peace, be the peacemaker, keep everything smooth among people, don't stand out too much, let others go forward. If something isn't right, don't say anything, because that'll just disrupt the peace. So you can see in that both the gifts and some of the drawbacks of that Enneatype, and with delusion being the main defilement, as we would know it in Buddhism, with the 3 performing. So 3 is the performer. So here the doing is about really being highly, highly productive. And the culture in the United States is a 3 culture. So, if you're in the United States, you're swimming in it. This is where, doing and being the best at doing, and doing as productively and efficiently as possible the thing that is most wanted, is how we're safe. And really every Enneatype does that, but they do it in different ways. So like for the 3, that hyper performance can be just a treadmill where people become workaholics, or no matter what they do or how good it is, it's never good enough. It's just a mouse wheel, So how that takes us away from our deeper nature is, okay, if I perform, then I have value. But what if I don't perform? What if I do something that isn't the best? Because, there's a lot of people on the earth, and only one can be the best. So whoever you are, there's going to be people who are better than you. So that can be pretty deflating for a 3 if you're always comparing with others. It's never enough. So there can be a lot of suffering there. So this is really where we see our value from the doing, like the 2, the giver, the helper, it comes from helping others, and that's how love is assured. So, but what if I actually need some help, what if a 2 needs some help? Well, then they're not the giver. Are people going to love them then? So there's this insecurity that if we stop the doing, our value is gone. And in Buddhism, we have Buddha nature. Our value isn't about doing. Our value is inherent. It's kind of the opposite of original sin. We have original goodness. That is one of the core tenets. So the doing isn't where our value comes from. Yes, it's wonderful to contribute in the world, but this is really part of the whole spiritual journey, is to unhook from that. And then one of the things I love about the Enneagram, as opposed to the defilements, I mean, you can see in Buddhism the word defilement, it's 100% negative, because basically what they're saying, it's defiling your consciousness, it's defiling your ability to know your deeper nature. That's why the word is used, but it's all negative. The Enneagram also shows us the gifts we bring, so it's equally as positive, where when we're free from the compulsions around our Enneatype, we can offer these things to the world without it being sticky. We can offer them in a clean way. And also our suffering goes down dramatically. So I think that's probably enough as an overview of the Enneagram. I really just wanted to offer this as an option for those who are interested, who want to, work with the personality material. It's so insightful. I mean, I had like 2 or 3 people this month in my mentoring program who were on the month 2, where we work with the personality, with the Buddhist defilements, like this is a great thing to do in your own practice, to see which defilement do you lean towards. Like, you'll hear people say, well, I'm a greed type, or I'm a desire type, or I'm an aversion type, or, delusion is the hardest one, I think, to really see. But to see that and have that be part of our understanding from a Buddhist perspective, but then the Enneagram gives a lot of nuance and depth in terms of really understanding how we've replaced our deeper nature as a refuge, as a real refuge for our living, for our understanding of reality and what we are, how we've replaced that with the physical, with the body, with the physical realm, and with the ego self. And a lot of that leads to suffering. I mean, this is really the core message of the Buddha, is to be free from that, is to be free from suffering, is really to thin out the ego self and our identification with it.
Tina, can I interrupt you just for a moment?
Yeah.
We had a request that if you could just hold up the diagram for a little bit longer.
Oh,
Some people
sure.
want to take a photo of it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And there's tons of them online. If you look up Enneagram, you can find a ton of them. But there is the diagram.
It's often in color too for people.
There's ones that are colorful. I didn't want to go through the whole thing of trying to show my screen, so I just go low tech.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I think what I'd like to do now is actually I like to interact with people. I don't like sitting and looking at a chat screen as a way of interacting with you all. So I know that it'll mean a few less people, but I would like to take a few questions. So Mary Lynn.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Nice to meet you.
I just was intrigued by, your whole talk and meditation was awesome. For the second time, I really appreciated everything you shared and offered. You did talk about briefly about how infants have no sense of time or space, and that there's there's a dual unity with the caregiver. And no separation yet. It does start around 2 years old when the child starts saying me and I and so on. From that standpoint, for somebody, unfortunately, like myself, who had abuse, severe abuse in infancy for the first 6 months, is there something like an angle that you could offer in terms of how to use Enneagram from that standpoint, given what you were sharing on that?
Yeah, and I'm sorry that was your experience.
Thank you.
That can be a lot to work with, but it can be worked with. That's the good news. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the Enneatype, a person's Enneatype, I would say people of every Enneatype would have a history like yours. So that kind of background isn't going to necessarily lead to a particular Enneatype. And all 9 Enneatypes are equally good and equally difficult, so it's not like we're trying to get to a certain one. So, you could do the work with the Enneagram? Do you know your Enneatype, or have you worked with it at all? Oh yeah, you have to unmute yourself.
A long
there-
time ago, but I forget what it was.
Yeah. So if you want to know, you could just look at a book, or I would suggest going to the Enneagram Institute, assessment and looking at the top 3, or if one really jumps out and you're like, yeah, this is it. And then the Rizzo Hudson, one of the really great things they have is levels. So what do the levels look like from the most sort of the person who's got the most, is most in the ego self, and all the way to the most free. And a lot of times people look at that and think, yeah, I used to be down here on the lower, and I've actually moved up some, and it can be really like uplifting, actually, if you've worked on yourself. But really the working with the Enneagram is the same whether a person has no abuse or whether they have a lot of abuse. So the working with the material would be the same, but it could give you a lot of insights. Like one of the people I was mentioning that I worked with this month, 2 of them actually had a lot of childhood abuse, and had done a lot of work on themselves. And it was really, I admired all the work they've done. And I'm sure I would feel that way about you if I knew the whole story. But when they saw their Enneatype, they could see so one of the things, and I talked about this last time, is that our personality patterns are made up of defense mechanisms, self-images, and beliefs from a psychological standpoint. So it can be really helpful to see the defenses that you employed in order to try and be okay in your environment, and how actually that was brilliant.
Mhm.
Even if it's causing you to be, one of the things with abuse is that it's hard to let go of those patterns because they may have saved your life. It probably did, if you look back. So there can be a lot of appreciation for them. And, ultimately, we really have to thank those patterns for helping us do what we needed to be okay. But the opportunity from a spiritual path isn't that we have to get rid of them. It's not that we're giving that up and never going back there. Like, say somebody is a worrier. Like sometimes people who have abuse will track the environment a lot and have a lot of heightened anxiety because that was served. That's served because you might avoid some of the bad stuff by doing that. But now it's causing a lot of unnecessary worry when maybe that isn't needed. So it can help free up and give more insight into what it did for you, and also the potential for freedom from that. So I'll just use that, like anxiety and worry as one. I don't know if that's yours or not, but it's really just curiosity on steroids. It's like an overused curiosity. So if somebody starts seeing that as an overused curiosity, it's like, that's interesting. And it gives more space. So that's a way to work with the Enneagram that can give you more insight into what you've already learned about what you did to be okay and how it affected you. And then, of course, there's all the therapeutic tools, working with attachment and working with trauma therapy. Therapists are brilliant, and they give us a lot of resources that aren't on the spiritual path that are great adjuncts to the spiritual path.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I hope it
you're
was
welcome.
not just too personal to me, but also helpful for some other people who might have experienced.
Yes, I hope so too, because it's very widespread, and I really appreciate your wanting to work on yourself. And fortunately, there's, with the trauma therapies, there's more and more resources available to really heal those things.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Yeah,
Tina.
you're
Thank you.
welcome. Okay, let's see.
Do you want to have
Okay.
Sally?
Yes.
Okay,
Sally. Okay, so do we, oh, good.
Okay.
Hi, Sally.
I noticed that when you mentioned the first one, number 9 at the top, ignorance and delusion.
Uh-huh.
I just wonder, you meant, out of all of them, you said that that was kind of particularly difficult.
It's a hard one to
Yeah.
see, like on the cushion, and also it's harder to see because, like, I'll just give you the on the cushion version of this, is often falling asleep. When one isn't tired, when one is well rested. If one is tired, then you can't tell whether it's delusion or not. But if a person's well rested, like when I teach my retreats, we're always working with patterning, and if I tell them on the first day, go take naps. If you're sleep deprived, go take naps. And if you're still falling asleep on day 3, let's start working with that as a defilement, because it's showing a go-to, like people who have that, we all have it. Like everybody right now, think of the conversation you should be having, but you just really are just sort of pretending it's not there. That's an example of how we all have delusion, or like making things better than they are. Like sometimes I've worked with people who are a 9 Enneatype, and they'll, like, month after month, I'll be, I work with them for a whole year, and they'll be like, yeah, everything's good, and they're married and have 3 kids and a job. And I'm thinking, wow, that's incredible. And about month 4, I start going, there's nothing in your life that isn't working? Oh, no, it's all good. And then we go back to their bio, and I start asking about their childhood, and they start actually seeing there were things here, but there's a glossing over, so that's more how delusion looks. It has a little bit of a Teflon quality where it's hard to really, sink your teeth into. But those are some of the ways that those are some of the indicators that can show all of us, because we all have delusion. I mean, we all have all 3 of the core defilements of Buddhism. Yeah. Does that help? Okay. Yeah, but it's the hardest one, because, like, say when you're sleepy on the cushion, if you try to investigate that, you're sleepy. So the sleepiness itself, if you're angry, you're angry.
Right.
That's not hard to see. Or if you're, lusting after a new, whatever, vacation, car, house, job, partner, you can see that more clearly. But with delusion, it's just, it's kind of in a fog.
Right. And I wondered if the frustration of that, over many, many years would kind of force situation, like needing to have somebody to bump off of in order to get to the anger or something.
That can be true, because sometimes 9s will all of a sudden see or delusion types will see, like, something, like I know of somebody who was married for years. People would ask, how's your marriage? And oh, good, fine. Well, it turns out that person was being abused, and it wasn't until her partner almost tried to kill her that she realized, I have to get my kids out of here.
Yeah.
So it sort of was in her face enough that it couldn't be ignored anymore. But, ideally we would get to it before that kind of level of, pain was necessary. And that's part of what's great about the Enneagram, is we can get to it sooner.
Right.
Whatever your Enneatype is.
I would imagine that would be almost a pattern of the delusion of
it is. That's why it's like Teflon. That's why it's the hardest one. But on the cushion, like, I've gotten in my 2-week retreat, I've gotten really good ways of helping people, of me seeing it, and then helping other people see it. But it's slippery. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just listening to, if you don't mind, I was just listening to Dr. Rick Hansen talk about rumination and what's not rumination, what's more trauma than rumination. It sounded to me like what he was saying. So it's hard to know, if the cushion can handle it, or if it needs something more
Right. Well, if people have
Just
trauma,
aware.
really working with the trauma therapist is the best thing to be
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
Always, because really when we're meditating, I mean, we're seeing the patterns and there are ways that the practice helps digest that, but the trauma therapies are designed specifically for that. And I really, when I find somebody that realizes they have trauma, I always refer them to a trauma therapist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's kind of what I
Yeah.
was just trying to clarify, really.
Yeah. But the meditation, I mean, I've had so many people who come back to me and then they're like, my therapist really wants to thank you. Because the two, the spiritual and the
Yeah,
therapeutic working together, that is the best combination to have.
absolutely. I mean, it
Yeah,
definitely was peeling away the just taking breaks from the rumination, obviously.
right. Exactly. Well, ruminating, I mean, if one is really working to work through the material, to me, I wouldn't call that ruminating. I would call that
Or yeah,
working on yourself in a way that is therapeutic. Ruminating to me is just spinning. That's not actually doing anything.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was something I noticed during the meditation tonight in particular, that there was some introspection and evaluation.
Yeah, well, this is where when we're doing Vipassana, we're actually going into the thing. So if we're doing that in a way that has potential to digest something, then that can be really beneficial. I mean, that's one of the values of Vipassana. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Well, there's more hands than we can get to. I don't know if I should stop here. Let's see, where's our host?
Tina, I think it's up to you if you want to take one more question.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
so
sure. I'll
easy
take
stuff.
one more.
But
Yeah.
maybe keep it just a question and then
Okay.
we'll cut it off there because
Sounds good.
it's dinner for some people. Okay, Thea, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yeah, I mean, it's tempting to go into a lot because I do have some background that I know something about the Enneagram already, and
Thank you for
you know,
keeping it to a
meditation.
question. Yeah.
Right. So I just wanted to, there's more I could ask, but I'm curious about you too. Anyway, so Tina, I'm pretty sure I'm a 9. I've been identified as a 9 by a teacher. And so I think I am. And I can see how that, well, in fact, due to trauma, one of the main things I do is, I can't think what you call it.
The delusion or fall asleep on
It's like
yourself. Kind of
delusion.
thing?
It's where you kind of leave the room.
Right. Well, dissociating is kind of the ultimate.
Dissociating. That's the
Right.
word. I mean, I used to be a
Yes.
therapist. I'm losing a lot of those kinds of things because of some
Yeah.
thinking issues as I age. So anyway, so my question is, I've meditated for a long, long time, like you, since I was a teenager. I My meditation has been such that I usually don't have any trouble with thoughts. Um,
Uh-huh.
Sometimes occasional one, and I can recognize it, and also lots of transcendence. But and it's been a refuge for me recently, stuff I'm going through and what's happening politically. But also the last two, including this one and last night, have been troubling. And a lot of old stuff came up last night, and I didn't start feeling happier. I started feeling more depressed. And tonight, just following um, your instructions, my mind was so busy, and thoughts have come up that I haven't thought in years, as far as I know. So anyway, I just wanted to ask about that. Basically, that's
Yeah,
pretty.
well, I'd have to know more about what kind of meditation you normally do. Is this different? I mean, when you're doing a meditation where there's one object that you're coming back to over and over versus say more of an over monitoring style like Vipassana, you're going to see the patterns more because it's harder to you know whether you're on or off that object really clearly, and also
Yeah.
having a meditation that's silent is going to really, that's like a heavier weight to lift, rather than lifting a 2-pound weight where there's a lot of background talking and things,
Yeah,
it's
last night I was doing rain, and tonight
uh-huh,
I was doing silent, one-pointed meditation, as you suggested, and keeping
right.
track of my thoughts. I've done all those things before, but more recently I've done less of both of those. So, um, um,
Yeah, well, there's really, I'd have to really talk with you longer to know what let's see. For some reason, I'm not seeing you now. I'm seeing someone else.
oh,
Oh, there you are. Um, I, I'd have to know more about what's going on for you to say what's happening. I can't really say a whole lot about it based on just what you've said, but if it ever feels like it's too much, then do something that's soothing. This is where, like the Brahma Viharas, doing some loving kindness for yourself or some
sure, sure.
compassion. If we're, and this is true for the prior people also, if you have trauma, or even if you just right, encountering some difficult material. This is why I talked last time about the 4 categories of meditation, but the heart practices are there to be a balm to help us have a way of soothing if we encounter something difficult, to it's like bringing an ointment to a cut, And so that
Mhm.
is always a go-to. If you find that you're encountering difficult material, to use that as an antidote, basically, to the difficult material as a way to regulate yourself. So
Thank
that
you.
would be, yeah, without
That's
knowing
a
the
good answer. I
backstory,
appreciate it.
yeah, that's always
Gives me something to
available.
do. Go
Yeah,
on. Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome, Thea. Okay, well, we'll probably need to stop there, but I really enjoyed being with you all. And let's see, I want to get you on the gallery again so I can see a few more people. Yeah. So anyway, many blessings to all of you. And it's lovely to be with you. And thank you to Rick Hansen for having me sub for him. I haven't been here in a couple of years, and it's nice to be back and see you all again.